Time is running out. This is the final drive of 2025 at Capital Ford. It's your last shot of the year to grab massive dealer discounts, year-end factory incentives, and aggressive trade-in offers. Like a new 25 Ford Explorer with 0% APR for 60 months. Or 0% APR for 60 months plus no payments for 90 days on a new 25 Ford F-150. So hurry for these exceptional end-of-year offers during the final drive of 2025 at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Good evening and welcome to the Pit Press Live. Please join us tonight on X, YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. We're here to talk about the Lobo's Rate Bowl 20-17 defeat at the hands of the University of Minnesota. I'm your host tonight, Ed Nunez, and I'm joined by our producer, Nick Nunez, our Pit Press beat writer, Greg Archuleta, and former UNM legendary running back, Dontrell Moore, who was at Chase Stadium and covered the game with Robert Portnoy. Dontrell, we'll go with you first. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on with us. We appreciate it. You just got back from the bowl game. I think it was yesterday. So, Dontrell, a close one. New Mexico drops a close one. I really thought Austin Brawley, if he hadn't slipped on that last play in the end zone, might have had a chance to break it up. Give Drake Lindsey credit. He put the ball right there in the breadbasket, and Minnesota wins a hard-fought game in overtime. What was your take?
Yeah, again, thanks for having me. A crazy game, to say the least. Everybody will probably talk about kind of the ending. For me, I go back to a couple plays in that first half where they had the ball inside the 1 yard line and do the shotgun snap and lose 4 or 5 yards and only get settled for a field goal. And then there was another play inside, I think maybe inside the 25, maybe the 15 where it was third and short. Decided to kick the field goal, and there's 2 plays inside the red zone, one inside the 5 where there's some points left on the board, and in a game where points were going to be at a premium, those were 2 opportunities lost. Nonetheless, they got themselves back in the football game. Bankson, who they had not been kicking it to all day, takes the kickoff return to the house, and there was just a jolt of energy in that baseball field, somewhat, to when Gonzo hit the walk-off single up the middle against the Yankees. It was electric in there. It really was. And then you're like, okay, here we go. And then overtime. And I was talking to Brawley after the game at the hotel, and he was telling me about that play. They were in coverage. He was supposed to, if there was a corner or a tight end that went to the outside, then that's where he was supposed to be. Torres was beat 1v1, and that's why the Jalen Smith was open. And then Brawley was just coming back to try to help late. So if he didn't slip, yes, he would have had an opportunity to potentially break up that play. And then that just falls in. And I thought, like you said, Drake Lindsey had a couple of those to Smith, right? You're like, what is going on that first one that he just kind of threw it over there? And I'm looking at it from my vantage point in the broadcasting booth, and I thought he was throwing it away. Makes a heck of a catch. And that one, too, should have been either intercepted or, something happened. But just ill-fated ending to what was a great season for the Lobos.
It's a good take there, and you're right about Drake Lindsey. That when he dropped in the other left corner of the end zone was about as perfect a pass as you can. Really can't get mad. You look at it. My son and I were watching. Arch, you wrote an article for the Pit Press. You've been great, giving us great coverage all season long as the beat writer. I read your article twice. And Dontrell alluded to some of the things you did. First and goal for New Mexico at the 3. And Lobstein gets attacked and loses yards, and they have to kick a field goal. Give us your take.
I pretty much agree with Dontrell. The thing to me was that it seemed like the first half they were a little out of character, as Dontrell said. Maybe not so much the first one. I think it was just a mistake. I agree with Dontrell. I thought Lobstein, you do a quarterback sneak there at the close and let him have a chance to go, and that way you don't lose the yardage and get that. But really surprised by the second one where they didn't go for it when they were in the red zone I think they had a 4th and 2 or 3. It was a short 3 if it was 3. And again, kicked a field goal. And you think there, like Dontrell said, where points are going to be at a premium. And, one drive gets Minnesota back in the game. If you get up 6-0, I thought for sure they were going to go for it there. But they kicked the field goal. And then, lost a little bit of momentum there when Minnesota kind of figured out to get the ball to, who I thought the best player on the field was, and Darius Taylor, the running back. And, again, like Dontrell said, give UNM credit because in the second half, it looked like Minnesota dominated the game. The one thing that I thought, again, and I just said that, the first half wasn't very UNM-like in their approach, a little bit conservative. I don't know if anybody in the stadium didn't think on that 4th down and they faked the punt and went for it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody was fooled by that. I think, especially, I'm certainly, thinking, and I'll ask you, Dontrell, I thought for sure they were going to fake the punt on the 4th down. I think everybody in the stadium thought they were going to fake the punt, or at least all the Lobo fans. And I had a pretty good inkling that Minnesota thought that, which is why Anthony Smith was able to blow that up. Dontrell, did you think that as well?
Right there just shows your knowledge of the football game, your knowledge of just kind of observation right there. Here's a couple things. Yes, everyone knew. The other thing that was noticeable was Jack was hurt. I don't know if you guys caught that. He was out, and he came back onto the field, right? And what they were setting up was, you guys recall, maybe 2 or 3 games ago, where Jack passed it and got the 4th down completion off the fake punt. Maybe they were setting that up. And then Anthony Smith, who I thought was the other best player on the field, who will be a 1st or 2nd round draft pick, just an absolute beast of a human being, never moved. He never moved. And I thought maybe McKinney could have maybe tried to outrun him to the outside and maybe use some of his skills and set right there, but he stayed at home and swallowed him up. But yeah, it was obvious that it was going to happen. I will say this though, guys, after that punt fake failure, they didn't give up a point. If you recall, they didn't give up a touchdown or a field goal. So the defense was game and still had an opportunity. So, and I think that's kind of maybe what Coach Eck thought. Hey, we're going to fake this here. It wasn't our best execution, which they've been that way all season, which is why I was questioned on the first quarter or the second quarter, that one where they had inside the 20-yard line or 18-yard line, and it was like 4th and 3 or 3rd, and they didn't go for it. I was kind of, shocked about that. But that being said, it was not a shocker to everybody that they went for it, and everyone stayed at home.
And that was the thing, Dontrell. What I would have preferred to see on that 4th down was them just line up and go for it with Lobstein. I think if that was a 4th and 2 where they tried the fake punt, and like you said, Eck was out, Jackson Eck was out of the game. They brought him in, so that maybe have tipped it off a little bit as well. And I would have preferred that they just line up and see if they could get the 2 yards that way. Especially, that the 2-point conversion they did after the great kickoff return was awesome. And so if they had another play like that in their bag, certainly I thought, that was there for the taking. But again, and like you said, Dontrell, it just seemed like, okay, once Bankston got the kickoff return and then they got the 2-point, it's like one of those, like, Sandy, here we go. I mean, they got outplayed, but here they are with a chance to win at the game, and you just thought it was going to happen. And Absolutely. Then, like you said, just a great pass by Lindsey and a great catch by Smith, 2 of them in the game that proved to be the difference. And again, once Minnesota started going to the Taylor, and I agree with you, my British should have catched that and said, I think Darius Taylor was probably the best offensive player of the game. I think you're right, Anthony Smith was the best player of the game. But UNM's right there. And again, getting the ball first in overtime is you're at a little bit of a disadvantage because like Coach Eck said, the 3 points is pretty automatic. And so you probably got to take that. But at least if you go second, you got to go 4 downs. And if the Lobos would have had that chance, maybe they could have done something different. But again, just it seemed like it was right for the Lobos there at the end. Just kind of a bitter ending to a fantastic season.
It really was, and both great points and great takes and a game of inches, Dontrell, how bounces go. Son, you and I watched it at the house, and we were of course really psyched up when they got that kickoff return right back in it, and then that, as Greg and Dontrell mentioned, the trick play to get the 2-point conversion momentum on UNM side all the way. What was your take?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit and share that that big kickoff take. It's right here. This is courtesy of John Benavides on X. But you see it here, and Dontrell, I kind of wanted to get your take on it. You know, it's one of those where you look at it on TV and it just looks like the Red Sea parted. I mean, he went untouched and pretty much went in a straight line. You had a different view of it, obviously, at Chase Field. What did this look like in real time as you were calling the game?
Yeah, Nick, great show right there. You can just see the speed and the openness of it. And I said it on air. It was like I said, Moses, he spit the Red Sea right there. But here's what I noticed a couple plays before, one kick before, is that they put Bankston like 6 or 7 yards deep, and they had told him return it no matter what. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. I picked up on it right away, and I said, oh, they're putting him deep. Typically, they're 1 or 2 yards or maybe even inside like the 2-yard line, but they put him – they were going to return it deep because that's the way the game was going. There was kind of a lull, and we know if we get him the opportunity to kick this ball or catch his ball, electricity can happen. So what I saw, Nick, was simply this, that they said he was going to return it no matter what. I believe after the big run by Darius Taylor and then that touchdown run by them in that drive, which up until that point they had done nothing. Minnesota had done nothing offensively. And they felt kind of, okay, we're good. And they kick it to him. And I talked to Bank after the game. I said, what were they thinking? You know, that was the electricity. So what I saw was simply he set it up, which good kickoff returners do. You make them think you're kind of going right a little bit, and then you come back just a little bit. Not a lot, just kind of about angles, right? Getting those angles where they can block, and no one was there. And, you know, he's typically the fastest guy on the field where he's playing. Here we go. And then, you know, Coach Slice, the offense coordinator for the Lobos, executed wonderfully with that play. He brings in Scott Trey Humphrey, hands the ball up, boom, fake. And then Jack waits just a little bit and dumps it over. So, and at that point, you could feel I'm going to say 10,000 plus, maybe fit. I mean, the reported attendance was 27,000. And I can tell you from being right there, being on the field, that the Lobos are outnumbered the Gophers. So I'm not saying there was 15,000 New Mexicans, but there was a lot. And I know Coach Eck had called for 10, and I'm going to say he got it. But you could just hear the buzz, and it's like, here we go. Here we go. Here's an opportunity for this game to be exactly where you want it. Then you think back to San Diego State, overtime, here we go. And so, yeah, man, it was an electric play by Bank. And, you know, I was glad to see him get in the end zone and get them back in the game.
We're speaking with all-time leading rusher for UNM football, Dontrell Moore. Dontrell, thanks for joining us. One more question from me, then I'll turn it back over to my dad. But just your thoughts on the 2-quarterback system that UNM has run kind of down the stretch of the season. You know, Jack Lane goes 10 of 25, 88 yards, and interception. He took a lot of flack after this game. It certainly wasn't all on him. I think it's kind of hard when you're running in, one quarterback out. You know, they were talked about it on the TV broadcast that Lobstein had some problems getting the signal in from the sideline, kind of delayed some things. But just kind of your thoughts on the 2-quarterback system.
Yeah, man, I like listening to people who understand the game right there. What you said, Nick, is absolutely inside knowledge about a football game. And it's simply this. If you're Jack and you're trying to stay in the game, you get a momentum. And I said it in the game, I'm a huge fan of Lobstein, a huge fan of the packages for him. Let me clear the air and make sure that said I'm a huge fan of the success that package has helped, has been for the Lobos. That being said, Jack was a little off. And it's not like I'm not picking on him. He's won 6 games. They won 9 games because of Jack, but he was just a little off. And I think that the rhythm of the game with the subbing in and out kind of had him off, where he had a couple of plays where he was high. If you guys can recall, he had Keegan one time, and I can't recall who the other one was. But he was off. So my only, not critique, because I love Coach Slice, the offense coordinator, is this: when you feel like your main guy is a little off, maybe keep him in on those 3rd and 6s, those 3rd and 4s, and not let Lobstein kind of come in. Because then what happens is the offense knows it's going to be a draw, whether it's inside or outside. They know it's a QB draw. So my take was just simply allow Jack to get in a rhythm. So, because can you imagine this, Nick? You're in for first down, you throw it incomplete. Now Lobstein comes in for 2nd, maybe even 3rd down, and on 4th down, you're asked to do what? Make a pocket pass, 3rd and 4. You know what I mean? And I know it sounds kind of, nitpicky from a sense, but if I'm a quarterback, I want to be in there and be able to get that rhythm. And so I would have liked to have kind of seen that, kind of maybe played out a little differently. But all in all, I think the 2 quarterback system, to your question, helped the Lobos, was very successful for the Lobos, and Lobstein can play. They were going head to head, for the starting quarterback job. So he's more than capable, and he's just tough. I love him as a football player. But I think in this game, and games are about feel, right? I think in this game, it may have thrown them off a little bit. And let's go back to that first quarter when they're on the 1. Just put Lobstein under center. Just put him under center there, and do the tush push or whatever it is, or sneak it as opposed to the shotgun snap. So, yeah, a big fan of the 2 system that they ran today. I thought it helped them all year, but I think it was a little, momentum killing for Jack Lane in this game where he was a little bit off. So,
and to your point, Dontrell, early on, in the first couple of series, they had Lobstein in, and he was passing the ball. And so I think they were trying to catch Minnesota with that. But I think, like you said, I think that may have had an effect on Jack because he was off. There were a couple open shots that he had there in the second half. And I think maybe that might have been part of it too. I think, hindsight 2020, right? But I think they were trying to catch Minnesota by using Lobstein as the passer. But I think it ended up affecting the rhythm of the Lobo offense, with only 200 yards total offense. Now, give Minnesota's defense credit, but I do think there were some plays that the Lobos left on the field.
I think, to your point, and Dontrell, your point too, tag team had worked really well. And there were some throws, but I think the pocket collapse, he held on, Jack Lane held on to the ball a little bit too long a couple times, where receivers getting open downfield. Keegan Johnson, he had him on a corner, and he overthrew him. So he didn't have the best day, but Anthony Smith was a record, man. You've seen him. He's going to the pros. He's going to be a high draft pick. He had 4 tackles for losses. And, I think UNM only completed 1 pass in the second half. So it was tough. Their passing game struggled. And Dontrell and Greg and Nick, usually those bubble screens and little, the Dorian Thomas, not a factor. Keith, not a factor. They like using the tight ends on those bubble screens, the yards after the catch, making it second and short. They were behind the sticks a lot. And I thought that hurt them in the second half. I thought Minnesota was the more physical team coming out in the third quarter, and Nick and I talked about that.
Yeah, I would completely agree, Ed. Like one of my keys to victory at the start of the game was the Lobos had to be efficient on first down, right? Against that physical front of Minnesota, they had to be efficient on first down and limit the negative plays. But what they did, what you just said, is very good. You guys I love talking football with people who are just observant like that. But they put Dorian Thomas out in motion and then bring him back in, chip the edge, and then throw him a little screen. And they kept going to that, and it wasn't effective. Like you said, Minnesota coming downhill, Nestor, they're, really good corner, people flying up, coming downhill. Anthony Smith could run sideline to sideline. Baranowski, oh my goodness, he could fly around the football. I knew you guys would all shake your head. Just an absolute monster running around. You guys would probably know, I don't remember how many tackles he ended up with. I know 17, it was double digits. 17 tackles, right? And that was, he had 5 games before that of 10 or more tackles. So just a beast, unblockable. So when you're running those screens and he's not accounted for, he's running and making the thing. But to you guys' point, they were behind the 8 ball a lot. And was my keys. They have to get to those third and shorts, second and shorts a lot of the time, take over and allow the tempo and then do the play action. But that defensive front, Eastern and Smith, those guys were just incredible. And you could just see them, you walk around and you're like, man, that was going to be the tell of the tape. But again, early on, they were kind of holding their own, in a sense, if you would agree, right? They were holding their own. They were coming out. They were getting the ball out. They were doing some things, getting down. It's okay, this game plan will work. But in the second half, and that's typically right. And, Lobo, true, but when a Big Ten team kind of starts weighing on you, bigger, faster, guys, I used to always say that. But the reality is if you have 12 good players and the other team has 6, at certain points, those 6 players will start to wear on you. And that's what Anthony started to do, especially in that second half. But again, here we are, right? Kickoff return, 2-point conversion, opportunity, the ball to drive still and end up punting. And stopping them and going to overtime. And, again, I remember saying this on air, and I said it to a couple of the players. it was almost anticlimactic the way the game ended. But for me, I stay where I am and where I've been to this season with 75 new players, all the turmoil that this team was on. Yes, the Rate Bowl was not, for me, the end. Like, what I'll think about this season is not how it ended, but what happened throughout this season. And I hope that things don't get blown up, as we'll potentially talk later in the show about. But I'm hoping that the momentum of this season can sustain at least for another season.
Yeah, Dontrell, one other question for me. As we look ahead into 2026, obviously a lot to break down, and everyone tuning in, we appreciate it. We appreciate you joining us on the Pit Press Live. I've seen a lot of the comments about what's going to happen with the news about Fernando Lovo and the rumors, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit. But Dontrell, sticking with football, looking at this roster going into next season, I counted maybe 30 seniors on the team. Some of the big playmakers likely exhausting eligibility like Damon Bankston. And then a lot of guys on defense seem like, they'll also be exhausting eligibility as well. Keyshawn James Newby, Tavion Combs, some other guys in the secondary. What do you think are the biggest needs for UNM football going into next season?
Yeah, I haven't looked at kind of like the roster breakdown quite yet like you did. But if I'm thinking off the top of my head, The glaring one to me, not glaring, is I do think that they need to bring in a QB that allows Jack to challenge and compete and to be better. I don't think it'd be a slap in the face to him. It's not. I just, can they get maybe someone who, maybe in the portal that can maybe challenge and start and, in that offense can, and here's the crazy thing. Jack broke Cole McCamey's record for completion percentage, highest completion percentage in a season. So let's not forget how well he played. What I'm saying is just someone who maybe could do a few more things with his feet, maybe a dual threat, someone who can do some things like that and just challenge him. Going to have to get a pass rusher again because Keyshawn James Newby he was out of this world. And I think they're going to need a cover corner. I think Torres is going to be a bright guy. I think as a freshman, he, obviously the last play of the game, he got beat on the one-on-one, but I think there's some opportunity for those guys. But I think they're going to have a D lineman to replace the rush in, someone in the back end, the DB or nickel. And I think that's kind of the glaring ones right now. I'm trying to think about running back. I know Bank is gone. I believe is there one more year for Scott Trey, I believe. And then so I definitely think quarterback just to challenge Jack, secondary for sure, and D lineman.
Yeah, Arch, same question to you. You've covered the team extensively. The roster probably just as good as anyone. What are your thoughts on biggest needs for UNM football going into 2026?
Well, and Dontrell, I appreciate you trying to, tread lightly, but I agree with you. I think, and I will say, and I think they said it on the broadcast that Jack probably watches. Slice said that Jack watches more film than he does. And Jack made so many great plays by checking out of plays or making runs and making first downs out of nothing. But in terms of just pure arm talent, a lot of the stuff that I saw from him, that he missed guys, he sometimes floated the ball. And I think they need a quarterback that can have a little bit better arm strength. And, maybe we talk about a dual threat again, but, Jack got every ounce out of talent that they could out of him. He had a fantastic year, but I do think somebody with a little bit more arm talent to come in and compete is priority number one. And I think Coach Jack said that afterwards is, they're going to have to replace a couple key players on defense, but that defense was what carried the team this year. And so offensively, maybe a couple, now that they've seen what, Big Ten defensive lines looks like, maybe get a little bit more stout up front as well. But I think it all starts with quarterback. And I think, and I'm sure Jack will be the first one to tell you that he's got to step it up too for next year. And so now that we've set these expectations for next season, I think quarterback is the top priority. Whether Jack can come in and improve upon what he did this year, if they can bring somebody else in that can compete, they need to have a better performance from the quarterback position in 2026.
Can I finish? Can I button that up real quick, Ed and Nick? I think
Yeah.
for me, there was not a better leader of men, right, for that offense than Jack. However, if you want to get to the CFP, if you have, want to get to it, and I'm, talking big, if you want to compete for a Mountain West Conference title, you have to have a young man who could stand in the pocket and make the out throw, make the deep throw, and with regularity, with no issues, right? And I think that's all I'm saying. Again, a huge fan of Jack. As a leader, as a competitor, and he got better as the season progressed. But I think if the Lobos ultimately want to make that next step offensively, it's going to have to be someone who can compete and challenge him to make him even step up even more to do the things outside of just being a general.
Apparently, they've got a quarterback signed for next year, Cade Mitchell. People were talking about him, don't know a lot about him. They've also got Cole Welliver on the roster, who's a big kid, 6'7", can apparently throw the ball. But I agree, with everybody that said this about Jack Lane. Now, remember, you mentioned, Dontrell, he tied Cole McCamey for the highest. Now, some of those throws were throws that he's going to make, that they're playing to his strength. I remember asking Coach Eck about Jack Lane. I said, hey, what kind of runner is he? He said, well, he's not a great runner, but he's going to take his chances. He's an effective runner. That's what he turned out to be. There was times I remember during the season, I was watching him get down. Someone's going to kill this guy, right? But he managed to stay upright and gain the yards that they needed when they needed them. And then that's what I mean. The 1-2 tandem between him and Lobstein, I thought was outstanding. Except like you maybe mentioned on Saturday it didn't work, or on Friday it didn't work so well for him. But that was the only game I thought Lobstein was a great compliment to him off the bench. So I think the running game. I don't know if Humphrey. He's a guy that they just kind of fumbled the ball. Really didn't get a lot of playing time after that. But Bankston and Buchanan, they had a full stable full. So I think the running back position is something they're going to have to look at. The quarterback position, you mentioned cornerback, that Torres kid. That kid looks like a player, man. He really does. Tavion Combs is a loss in the secondary, but I've got all the confidence in the world that Coach Eck is definitely going to be able to recruit the players that are needed in those positions. He proved that. But I think, Greg, what you said too, tying it all up, and then we're going to take a break and come back and talk about Fernando Lovo. Greg, you mentioned, starting the season with the loss to a Big 12 opponent, and then finishing the season in a very close loss to a Minnesota team that was probably physically and stronger, bigger, played a tougher competition. I thought New Mexico, and remember, we said this, you mentioned it, Dontrell, 73 new players. Who would have thought New Mexico would be, playing at University Stadium in November with 30,000 people there, and the fans would cause two legal procedure penalties that hadn't been seen in years. So I think all things, it wasn't the ending we wanted with the Rate Bowl, but I think all things, consider, they had a great season. Coach Eck really did a wonderful job here. So I don't think anybody can really complain about, we like to won the Rate Bowl for sure. But we're gonna take a break, and when we come back, we will talk about the future athletic director here, if we still have one, after these messages on the Pit Press Live.
Because Capital Ford is celebrating 60 years in business, we're holding a very special signature sales event where we're rolling out our strongest offers of the year on every new Ford car, truck, and SUV in stock, like a new 2025 Ford Bronco Sport. Lease today for just $399 a month or 0% APR for 60 months, plus no payments for 90 days on a new 2025 Ford F-150. But hurry, this signature sales event is for a limited time at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Welcome back to the Pit Press Live. I'm your host for this evening, Ed Nunez, joined by Pit Press beat writer Greg Archuleta, former UNM legendary running back Dontrell Moore, who did the game in Chase Stadium with Robert Portnoy, the Rate Bowl, and has worked all season long as the color analyst for 7 seasons now, I believe. Is that right, Dontrell? 7 seasons. And also my son, producer Nick Nunez, who's pushing all the buttons behind the scenes. Again, fellas, thanks everybody for joining us. Now, I think everybody was rocked a little bit by the news. Somebody texted me and asked me, did Lovo take the Colorado job? And it came out of the blue. I had no idea. Fernando Lovo, for those who don't know, unless you're in a cave, everybody has heard about it by now. Athletic director Fernando Lovo, after one season, is rumored to be on his way to Colorado to take the athletic director job there. Apparently, the Board of Regents at Colorado are going to meet to decide upon it. UNM put out a statement last night that everything's the same. We're operating as if everything's the same. If there's any news, we'll let you know. I got to say, I was pretty surprised about that. I know he's done a great job here in his first season, and but I'm not gonna say I wasn't a little bit surprised. Greg, I'm gonna go to you first. What was your thoughts on that?
Maybe not as surprised as everybody else was, because one, he's a younger guy, and so somebody in his mid-30s, and you saw how sharp he was, and he was destined for bigger things, and more so, I think, than Coach Eck. I think I saw the writing on the wall that, especially with this home run, that he was going to be a hot commodity after this football season with what the Lobos accomplished. And so, again, not shocked. And I guess that vote is going to come, or that approval process at CU is going to come tomorrow. And supposedly then it'll be official, but still status quo right now. But the thing I get at, and Dontrell, I'm sure you have appreciated of this, is when you read all the comments, and it's like the sky is falling, right? And here we go, oh, same old New Mexico. And I never thought, as sad as I am to see Fernando Lovo go, if it's true, and I think by all indications it is, I don't see Coach Eck tied to him. There's a lot of speculation that, he's going to take him with him to Colorado. One, I think Eck, if anything, is a Big Ten guy, not a Big 12 guy. And so, and I don't see, and I know I'm jumping the gun here talking about Coach Eck, but I don't see Coach Eck as the guy, especially when he comes off the plane and does a video with his family saying, hey, Lobo fans didn't make it this year to a bowl game. We're going to go back next year. And then all of a sudden jump ship with Fernando Lovo. So again, Fernando Lovo did a tremendous job in his 1 year here. If the rumors are true, it's going to be a big blow to him, and we'll have to see who steps in, who UNM gets. And I'm sure they have already some candidates that they're considering, and we can talk about that a little bit, but not shocked at what happened. Because I knew that, a young, upwardly mobile guy as bright as Fernando Lovo, his star was bright, and somebody was going to look at it.
That was probably quicker than I would have thought. I think everybody was thinking about Coach Eck maybe leaving, and you're right, Greg. He is a shining star. He's he's out there in the community, increased Lobo football attendance by how many percentage. He did a great job here, and for sure in his short time here. Dontrell, same question to you. What did you think when you heard it?
Yeah. For me, initial shock, and here's why. It was when it happened, not that it happened. I absolutely felt like within the next 2 to 3 years, he'd be the head athletic director at a massive school, right? Where he's that much of a stud. I have nothing but respect for him. He is an absolute stud of a young man. He's a stud of a human being. He's a stud of a move maker. He knows what he's doing. Urban Meyer, right? Was with him for years. He was at Austin before he came here. Just, we know his pedigree. So my shock wasn't that he was gone, was that there's talks now, that it's like at this point. I remember, being on the plane, and I kind of looked over at him, and, he always says how we always have a kind of exchange. And I didn't know if the exchange was, minimal because of the loss, or, something was brewing in his head. You always do these things. I remember, when Bronco left, and then, when Coach Gonzalez left, or then when Eddie left, all the time, just, you're observing as a human being, your interactions with people, and they seem a little different, toward the end. I'm like, is that the same feeling I had when Eddie really, when I looked over at him, he was less friendly. I don't know, so all in all, I think that I'm shocked because I didn't think it would happen now, meaning at this juncture. I thought this would be a 2 or 3 year thing where he'd come and do the things that he's done, concluding this year, get the new hires, basketball coach, football coach, do some big things, and then be gone because of who he was and it was what he was destined to be, as Mr. Archuleta has alluded to. But I was shocked because I didn't think it would happen this soon. That being said, I don't feel as though it's doom and gloom, because if the football team does well, the university does well, right? That's just the way it's been at schools, that the football team's thriving. And let's not forget, right? Rate Bowl almost won, 9-4. There's momentum surrounding the football team, and that can be carried on as long as the head man is still here. And as we sit here today, he is still here. And he is the person that is spearheading that. So is it a blow? Absolute blow if, in fact, that happens tomorrow for the trajectory, the stadium. He was with the legislator, those things, just a mover and a shaker, right? If those things kind of subside, it's a huge blow to University of New Mexico. But it's December, the fall will be upon us in a blink, and that's when, we'll start to see kind of things transpire with the football team and kind of see how things go. But personally, this is just personal. I'm bummed just because I felt like the trajectory that he and Eck could put this school on is, as a Lobo, was something I was super proud of and excited to kind of see that kind of unfold, as things have been kind of doom and gloom since I left, and aside from the 15 and 16 season. But even then, it just didn't feel the same, right? It didn't feel, even when, you think about the bowl game with Bob Davie and they, 2016, and it was 18,000 people, you know what I mean? And this just felt different all year. It just felt like when I was playing, Greg, you can remember, like when there was an actual love and great feel about the University of New Mexico football team and its ability and its winnability and its, stayability and its staying power. That's what it felt like, where there was this general foundation of love and support and good football, coupled with love and passion and excitement about the people in the red. And that's what it felt like. So I'm hoping that, although, one of the heads of that operation, maybe, moving elsewhere for his family and doing things that, that are for him, I'm hoping that, there's a couple of other heads that are still leading this thing that, can kind of keep the momentum going. That's
real important, I think. Son, you and I had a long talk about it today. What was your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of tough, heartbreaking news, to be honest. I echo what Greg and Dontrell said. I mean, I was a little surprised at the timing. I think Greg is right. He's an up-and-comer, a young guy with a lot of ambition. You can kind of tell. But it just kind of came out of nowhere. Everybody was thinking it's going to be Jason Eck. He's kind of the big name that a lot of programs would be chasing after. I just kind of think about all that Fernando Lovo has done in a year for UNM athletics, not just the two big name hires with Jason Eck and Eric Olin. I mean, everyone can kind of point to those and say those are no-brainers. Anybody could have made those hires. But just think about the investment that he put into football and the engagement, man. I mean, just think about some of the things that he did. The free tickets for kids to get in, the $4 concession stand items. I remember the first home game against Idaho State. UNM Athletics ran a promotional video on all social media platforms where he kind of did a drive tutorial about how to access the stadium easier. I mean, he was a really engaging guy. I think he's very talented, and you can see why he's got a bigger calling. Disappointed if it is just 1 year, but it is what it is, man. This is the kind of business and industry that we're in. No one's going to stay forever, unfortunately. I mean, there's some guys like Leon Rice at Boise State men's basketball has been there for 16 years. I think he's kind of an outlier. So disappointed, but also thankful to Fernando Lovo and his team for what they accomplished for UNM athletics in 1 year.
Well said. Nick, that is a well said opinion. One of the things about being engaging, my wife and I saw him at Barella's Coffee House. Came over, talked to my wife, spent about 5 minutes. I mean, he is an engaging guy. And so, Dontrell, would you say that about you saw things ahead for UNM that you hadn't seen in a long time? You felt good about it. And when you were here, and I want to make sure people remember that, when Rocky Long was here and the team at that time, nothing against the team this year, had several New Mexicans on it that started and were consistent performers, and that made the community feel even better. Nothing against Coach Eck or Fernando Lovo. I just remember that. You, Cole, Hank, Josh, Ian Clark, a bunch of them, Ryan Cooks. There's a lot of New Mexicans on that team. And I think the feeling about this team this year. I certainly felt that about Coach Eck. My wife loves him because he's sitting there, to the fans. He's got hip bumping people. I mean, he does the lowrider thing. The guy I thought it's an amazing, he draws people to him. And Greg, to your point, now we're going to get to this next question. Greg, to your point about him getting off the plane and saying, "Hey, we're going to be back." With Coach Eck, Coach Jason Eck, that you think he's going to stay. Hopefully that's true. But what I want to ask all three of you, and Greg, we'll go with you first. What's next for UNM athletics now? Does Dave Williams, is he still interested? Dave Williams is at Houston. He left with Eddie. Ryan Berryman's certainly a possibility. Ryan Berryman's got experience, not the experience that Fern Lovo does, but that guy's been loyal, man. Left, came back, learned under Eddie, learned under Fern Lovo. Is he a possibility? Greg, what do you see as far as the next step for UNM athletics if this is indeed true that Fern Lovo is on his way to Colorado?
Well, the first thing, and like we just all talked about, is that Fernando Lobo left the program in a better condition than when he accepted it. And that's all you can ask for a guy, whether it's 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, right? And so maybe we're at this trajectory where now UNM in the not too distant future may not be a 1 year stop for coaches, for ADs, for administrators. Having said that, I think this is now a more attractive position. So I think UNM can get some candidates, but you mentioned, Dave Williams and Ryan Berryman. The first thought I had, and I'm going to age myself here too, because this is how old school I am, is like, hey, I know at one time there was some talk that Rocky Long might be head coach / AD. And I was thinking, I wonder if Jason Eck would have any interest in being coach / AD. I think maybe it's a little bit of different environment with college football now, where you see Coach Eck all over, and I don't know if that's a dual job that many people can do nowadays just because of the NIL and all the other things that go into it. But I will say that I think this position now is more attractive because of what the football program did, because what Fernando Lobo did in the 1 year, and now people can see what can be done here at UNM in just a short amount of time. And so I think there will be a wider net of candidates than there might have been previously because of the success not only of the football program, but what Fernando Lobo was able to do in his 1 year.
Greg, I'm going to get to you, Don Trout, in a second, and I'll get to you, Nick. But Greg, you mentioned this about being a home run hire with Fernando Lovo, with Olin. Coach Olin's having a good year so far. With Jason Eck being a home run hire, Fernando Lovo was a home run hire. UNM right now without a president, that there's some things that play into that. I'm the voice at Western New Mexico, and they really can't make any moves there. They don't have a president, and their AD is interim. So without a president, I just kind of wonder. There's rumors about who the new president might be, but you mentioned a home run hire, and Lovo was a home run hire. I thought, when Eddie left, they looked at Dave Williams, they looked at some other people, but I thought Fernando Lovo was and there's a good comment there, tired of the lack of stability in college athletics. Next thing you know, Lobo, Louie and Lucy could have been as well for another university per the almighty dollar. And that's John. That's funny. That's kind of funny. Son, I'm going to get to John Trell in a minute, but you're thinking about athletic directors. I mean, I just like the guy. Whenever you see Fern, it's what's up. Saw him at the press conferences. He's going to always engage. Like you said, Don Trell, you looking at him, and you must have known, because his mind must have been going a million miles, and he's not thinking about what's in front of him. It's in the back of his mind what he might have to do. So, yeah, and you've got good intuition. You've been around, man. You've been around the athletic department for a long time. Son, your opinion about what do you think is going to be next for UNM athletics? They seem to be, as Greg and Don Trell have mentioned, on a good trek upward. What's next?
Yeah, well, first things first, they got to name an interim, right? And I think that's going to come sooner rather than later. Tomorrow, we will find out officially whether this is true. I think all signs point to the fact that it is. But step one is naming an interim, and you got to think, all the names that we talked about. A couple guys or people we haven't mentioned, Amy Bagan. She's been in athletics for a long time, handling compliance with the NCAA. She's got institutional knowledge that a lot of people don't have. Jalen Dominguez is the finance guy. He handles all the fundraising for UNM athletics. I think the interim tag is going to be someone internal. Ryan Behrman's another guy that you just mentioned, Dad. He's the operations guy. If you go to golobos.com and kind of read about what he does, he's got his hand in kind of everything that's in the athletic department. So to me, it seems like he's the interim guy. Does he have the experience to be the permanent guy? I mean, I think that's a decision that the Board of Regents and the new president have to make collectively. But the first step, Dad, is naming an interim director. They've got to do it soon. Yeah. Football just came to a close. But with this ever-evolving world of NIL, I mean, every day something changes. We're reading about guys that are drafted in the NBA, guys that are playing in the NBA that are drawing interest from college athletics. I mean, this is something that changes every single day, and UNM can't skip a beat. They've got to stay on board amidst the news and the change.
The interim AD last year was Dave Williams, and Dave Williams made it clear he wanted that job. He did. And I remember talking to him upstairs at the pit, and he wanted it. And he applied for it. There might be interest on his part less than a year later. So maybe the UNM does a national search. Here's what I want to ask everybody here, though, and we'll start with you first, Dontrell. We had Glover Quinn on our podcast about a year and a half ago, and this is exactly what he said, man. He said, look, if they do well at UNM, and this is then, and Greg, you made a good point about it being a better job now. But he said, players, coaches will use UNM as a stepping stone to move on. Now, let's go over some of the things that have transpired here just in the last 2 years. Okay, JT Toppin gone to Texas Tech, $4 million. Donovan Dent, $3 million at UCLA. Richard Pitino, $4 million at Xavier. Bronco Mendenhall leaves us hanging. I don't know how much. I don't think he made that much more at Utah State. He leaves. Eddie Nunez leaves. Now Fernando Lovo has left. So is it going to be a place where the new AD, Greg made a good point, but is money always going to be that driving factor that we just can't keep? And Glover made a good point, man. When Glover said that, I had to really think about that. And the guy knows he wasn't being mean about it. Dontrell, I think Greg makes a point. It is a better job now that Fern was only here a year, but he did amazing stuff. What's your opinion about it going forward?
I struggle with this question, and I've struggled with this question since I left. Why does it have to be a stepping stone? Why does it have to be that? And I think, it's the trajectory of the school, since 2009-ish, 10, whenever Loxley took over, from there is kind of where I put is my, guideline where things kind of started changing. It's tough because I do feel that Glover's correct, and it's been that way for quite some time, where whoever's going to come here, they weren't going to stay here for the long haul. The only one that I feel, not just go coaches, that I think would have stayed here for the long haul was Coach Gons. I do think that had there been some more winning and some more players and different difficulty, and he was upward too. You remember he went 2, 3, 4. Obviously it wasn't good enough, and then figured out what was going on. But I think that to fix the problem, you're going to have to get someone who is just true and is not looking for it. And I'll be honest, I thought that was going to be Bronco, if I'm being honest. I really didn't. I thought that was a home run hire at the time because it was someone who has been from here. His sons were born here, and it would have to be someone who's born here or who has ties here and who's kind of done their thing, but is young enough to still be really good for the next 5-10 years, and someone who's wanting to be here. And so I think that's the fix. But I do think Glover's right. I think you guys are talking about it. I do think that's a reality, unfortunately, that we're just going to be, come and show what you can. And as soon as there's a bigger dollar, a bigger opportunity, they're gone. And the only way I think that can stop is if it's someone who wants to be here, literally wants to be here, doesn't want to leave, and wants to turn New Mexico into what I felt like when I left, that we could be the Boise of the Mountain West. Like we're it's an even more attractive destination than Boise, but they had Peterson there who wanted to be there and stayed there and saw it true because he got some offers too, right? When he was doing these things and wanted to stay around. So my point is, I think that whoever it is, whatever, after they get the president and they get the athletic director and they have their coach, and obviously people will say in a year or two, if Eck does a 9-3, he's gone to Wisconsin, right? Everyone will say those things that potentially we'll be having the same conversation next year, potentially. Unfortunately, that's a possibility. But my point is, if they could get somebody in place who wants to be around and stay here, then I do think the trajectory and the momentum and the energy and the things that have transpired this year will allow them to, see this for the next 4, 5, 6 years. But until that happens, it'll just be what it's been, which is 1 or 2 years, 2 or 3 years, and then you're off to the next best thing. So to Nick's point, I do think Ryan would be the interim guy that they've talked about. Know Jalen and Amy obviously really well. And that is a point because everything has to keep going. Here's what happens. The timing of this, like Nick said, is shocking because now the momentum and then everything that you have to stay on top of it. Because if there's a gap for 4 or 5 months or 2 months, then you're behind the 8 ball. And now all the momentum that's come from this, now we're reeling and, oh my gosh, and did we get the NIL people? Did we get the right kids? Did we get you know what I'm saying? So you have to stay off because it's a business out. College football is a business. College sports is a business, and you have to have somebody at every stop doing everything 24/7, 365 days a year if we want to get this thing turned around from a university standpoint. And we've done that because it starts with football, right? No matter what, right? A university will be as successful as their football program. Because think about the basketball program. They've been really successful, and the athletic department has struggled, right? The basketball. And so when you marry those two, 2002 to 2005, we went to 3 straight bowl games, and then Danny Granger and it was at an all-time high from a university because both of the Giants were really good, and you have to have that. And I'm hopeful that, they'll continue that trajectory.
I think they need, hopefully somebody gets that baton and keeps, moving in the same direction. Different ideas, different philosophies. We get that. I understand that. Everyone's going to be different. You're lucky to get a Fern Lovo, man. You're lucky to get people in here like that. Hopefully it's going to be somebody similar. Greg, same question. What do you think going forward?
Well, the thing to me is, I remember when was it, 1992, Rudy Davalos left the University of Houston to come to New Mexico. And then Dontrell, you talked about Eddie left UNM to go to the University of Houston. And the issue is, and I talked about this in the preseason, Texas State, a team that UNM beat 72-8 or something like that, way back when.
72-10.
Is now going to be in the Pac-12. UNM has been stagnant in this. So the on-field product has to improve. And again, for somebody to stay here, and Dontrell, you're absolutely right. I thought Coach Gons too would be the guy that if he was successful would stay 10, 15, however long he wanted. I was so hoping that Rocky Long would be AD somehow or somehow be affiliated with a program to have some stability. That's the dream, right? To have somebody born and bred here that wants to stay here, but the reality is that there are very few candidates I see, unless Brian Urlacher or something like that, or Dontrell, maybe if you wanted to, start pursuing that. But there does need to be somebody, but absent that, and the only thing that the trepidation I have is how many times can UNM keep hitting home runs with the hires from AD to coach, from football coach to basketball coach, because they're going to keep needing to do that for UNM to keep elevating itself to become an attractive enough program to become like a Texas Tech, where they were, middle of the pack Big 12, and now they're competing for championships in the college football playoffs. So UNM needs to have some overall plan. And to your point, Ed and Nick, not having a president is job 1, 2, and somebody's got to have a master plan on getting UNM there. But UNM has to stop spinning its wheels and keep getting left behind in these conference realignment situations in football, because as Dontrell said, football drives the bus in college athletics. As great as the basketball program has been, we've seen this year what football does for a college athletic program with the success UNM had. And so this next hire is going to be critical. And I think both of you and Nick are right, Dontrell, that it should be Ryan Berryman. He's got his hand in everything just to keep the momentum going and until they find a permanent replacement. But that's going to be the critical thing, is how many home runs can UNM keep hitting with these hires until they get to a point where this job is attractive enough that once somebody wants to stay here, longer than the 2-year, 3-year grace period, and use it as a stepping stone toward that next job.
That's a good assessment there. And, we had Eddie Nunez for 7, and Paul Krebs before that. That's a forgettable era. After all the things that transpired when he was athletic director, he did some good things too. But son, same question to you. I mean, what do you see as that being going forward with UNM athletics as far as the athletic director position? Is it going to be something somebody wants to stay at?
Yeah, I think it's going to take conference realignment, like Dontrell and Greg have said. And then it's going to take someone just wanting to be here, wanting to be in New Mexico. Look at Jason Eck. He's embraced the real ones mentality. And I know Greg and Dontrell have already kind of touched on that. But, man, the dude's riding around in a lowrider, going to Frontier. He's out in the community, man. I saw Jason Eck with his family at this place in the North Valley. I forget the name of it, but it's a place where you can gather, do Christmas shopping for Christmas trees. The name will come to me in a second, but he just rolled up with his family, no entourage. It was a Saturday during the holiday season before the bowl game. And that's just a guy that's just embraced this community. His son plays at La Cueva High School as a freshman. I think he plays on JV. He wants to be here. It's going to take somebody who wants to be in New Mexico. You think back to the prior coaches that we've had. Bronco Mendenhall didn't want to be here. Bob Davie hated it here. He lived at Scottsdale for 6 months out of the year. Steve Alford wanted to be here. He kind of embraced New Mexico, and then UCLA came calling. He gave us 5 years. You can't blame the guy. But yeah, it's going to take somebody who's somewhat rooted in this community or who's going to embrace this community. And we found one in Jason Eck. Hopefully we can find somebody else who's in it to be here long term.
Yeah, great look at that, Nick. And we'll see. We'll find out more in the next couple of days. I got one more question. We're going to wrap it up. In a revamped Mountain West Conference, we're losing Boise State, Utah State, Colorado State. We're losing 5 teams. Mountain West Conference is losing 5 teams. How competitive do you expect New Mexico to be? That's on the bright side. Some might say haven't won a championship since '64 conference championship. How competitive can New Mexico be going forward in a revamped Mountain West Conference? Dontrell.
Yeah, I initially before the Fernando Lovo incident and kind of the momentum, you'd asked me this like 2 weeks ago, which I've been asked. I think that the New Mexico can be the class of this, group of 5, or like that kind of concept, right? In Mountain West, the class of the Mountain West Conference. And I think that's where your expectations have to be. You have to tell yourself you're going to compete. I like there's an odd number of teams, so there's everyone plays each other, right? And there's no stuff that happened this year where the tiebreaker that we all know or believe, in my opinion, that the Lobos were shafted. But I think that the conference can be the I like it, Ben. The conference can be there for the taking. You go win the championship. You go, if your mentality is that, I think that's what it needs to be. I believe Northern Illinois and UTEP, and what's the third? Am I missing one?
UC Davis is coming in. UTEP.
UTEP, Northern Illinois, just football.
Yeah.
UTEP, it's okay. UTEP, Northern Illinois, and there's one other one that I think I'm missing, but maybe not. I think that's all.
I think you are. I can't remember who it is.
Yeah, I think it's those 2. I know it's those 2 for sure. But my point is, I think that if the Lobos can keep momentum, they got their head man in place, they can kind of regroup. We know what Eck can do if we end up leaving people. There was some talk, from the offensive side of the ball that people weren't happy, and that, some of the people who were part of the team may be going elsewhere. And we know with the portal and the NIL that could potentially happen. Could he regroup? But ultimately, to answer your question, Ed, I think that the Lobos need to be and can be the class of this conference based off this year, right? Obviously, some things have to kind of go in order. They have to make some adjustments and from what they're losing, but no reason to believe that they cannot and need to act and feel like to go be the class of this if you're only going based off this year.
Greg.
Well, yeah. So, and Dontrell, you're right. In football, it is only Northern Illinois and UTEP, but I think Coach Eck said it when as one of the reasons why he came here is UNM will and should be among the leaders in spending money in the revamped Mountain West, so they should be competitive in the Mountain West year in and year out. And between them and UNLV, those two teams should be competing for the majority of championships in every sport. And so maybe that's where UNM can kind of get some ground and position itself for the next conference realignment shift to get itself into a better position on a national level. But I think we're all expecting UNM to be one of the leaders in the revamped Mountain West next season, and would be very surprised if they weren't competing in each of the big sports in football and basketball and women's basketball, because they should be among the league leaders in spending among the teams that are coming in.
No doubt about it. Nick, same question to you. You also want to share some information about some contract issues.
Yeah, for sure. Just real quick on, UNM's being competitive in the new Mountain West. Absolutely. I echo what Dontrell and Greg said. You're losing Boise State, San Diego State, Colorado State, Utah State, some of the more premier teams, at least on the football side and men's basketball. Obviously, this is a conference where all the sports matter, but the two big ones, the two money makers, with the new teams that are coming in, no disrespect to UTEP, their football program's been down a little bit. Northern Illinois has traditionally been good at football. I think they can give, this conference a little bit more respect. We had a commenter here, Hawaii is going to be scary next year. Hawaii won the Hawaii Bowl over Cal in a comeback win. They were down at halftime. They've done a really good job the last 2 years in revamping their program. I think it'll be a competitive Mountain West Conference, not as competitive as we've seen. So UNM should be right there in the thick of it. Did want to address a couple things that have been asked here by our commenters. One, how much is Fernando Lovo making? I've got Fernando Lovo's contract here up in front of me, and I know the Albuquerque Journal reported on this earlier as well. But Fernando Lovo's base salary is $400,000 per year. So that's what he makes. And then I wanted to share something about kind of what CU will owe, or what Fernando Lovo will owe if and when he does leave. So I've got his contract pulled up here, and anybody can go get this, by the way. This is on golobos.com. You go to Inside Athletics and you go to Game and Employment Contracts. It'll take you to Fernando Lovo's contract. If you go all the way down to page 7 of Fernando Lovo's contract, it talks about what the buyout is for him. You'll see here at the bottom of page 7 and the top of page 8, it's that second to last sentence right here. Therefore, if Mr. Lovo terminates this contract during the contract term, Mr. Lovo agrees to pay the university as liquidated damages and not a penalty 50% of his base salary for the remainder of the contract term within 90 days of such termination. So, at least as far as Fernando Lovo's contract goes, he's done 1 year on it. He's on contract through 2029. So it would be $1.6 million that he would be owed in total. 50% of that would be $800,000. So CU and or Fernando Lovo would be on the hook to UNM for $800,000 if he does end up leaving. There were also some questions about, well, what does this mean for Jason Eck? That was also touched on by Jeff Grammer in the Albuquerque Journal in his article. I'll just share his contract briefly and go over the most important part. You can see same thing, golobos.com, Game and Employment Contracts. This is Jason Eck's new contract that has an effective date of January 1, 2026. It'll supersede the other one that was signed last year. And if you go down, I think it's page, I want to say 9 and 10 of 13. This is Jason Eck's contract buyout language. You can see for year one, the buyout is $4 million. Then it goes down to $2 million, $750,000, $500,000, $300,000. This is the big language right here. And I'll kind of zoom in so everybody can see it. If Fernando Lovo's contract expires, he's terminated, or he otherwise no longer serves as the AD, and coach subsequently notifies UNM of his intent to terminate his contract within 12 months of the cessation of Fernando Lovo's employment with UNM, then liquidated damages set forth in this section shall be reduced by 50%, provided, however, that this provision shall not apply in the event that coach takes employment at an institution at which Fernando Lovo is employed in any capacity. Thereafter, the liquidated damages owed for early termination shall revert to their original value. So I understand that to mean that if Jason Eck were to go to Colorado, which he's not going there. That's where Primetime is. And Primetime just signed a long contract extension earlier this year in March, all the way through 2029. And I think he's going to be able to write his own ticket. If he wants to stop coaching for health reasons, he certainly can do that. But, he just draws so much engagement to the university for CU. They talked about it like CU's enrollment has been up since Prime has been there. So I think it's his job as long as he wants it. But if Jason Eck were to go to CU within the year, the buyout would still be $4 million. If he goes anywhere else within 1 year of Fernando Lovo, expressly telling UNM, I am out, then the buyout is reduced by 50%. I won't pull up Eric Olin's contract. It is also on golobos.com. His contract does not have the same language that Jason Eck's contract does. Eric Olin's buyout is $2.65 million the first year, and then it goes down here and there. So I know there's been a lot of comments about what does this mean, for our coaches. Anybody who has questions, you don't have to be a lawyer. You can go on to golobos.com, game and employment contracts, look up the contracts yourself. It should tell you what you need to know.
Great breakdown, Nick. And for all you listeners and viewers, my son, the attorney, man, I couldn't be prouder of him. I thought that's people want to know, and there's the information there if you want to look it up yourself, because people were wondering that. I think I was wondering the same thing. Dontrell, Greg, Nick, anything else for tonight? It's been a great show. Dontrell, Greg, can't thank you enough for joining us, son. Thanks for producing. Anybody, Dontrell, you got anything else?
Yeah, in closing, I'd like to say, obviously, well done, Nick. That was really special. And I think to tie that up for the listeners from a novice standpoint is simply put, if CU wants Fernando Lovo, they'll write a check and they won't even blink about the rest of it, right? They'll write a check and they won't even blink. I mean, 800,000, 4 million, 3 million, they'll write a check and Fernando will be off in the dust. So if that's going to happen, that's going to happen. And Eck staying put he's going to stay put, in my opinion, simply because there's nothing better for him right now. This is where he's going to be for at least a year. You know what I'm saying? And so he said that, I had a couple offers in the, office, and nothing was, unless it's Wisconsin, I'm not going anywhere. Right. So again, thanks for having me on. I think that for, listeners and for Lobo Nation, there's kind of a bittersweet kind of feel to things right now. And I think that the foundation should make you smile. And, we'll wake up in the morning and we'll kind of put some pen to paper and it'll be kind of official if it is. But moving forward, that there's a head man in place in the football. The basketball is playing well. That there's a plan, at least for the football team, to keep moving forward, at least for one more year. And so again, Lobo Nation, I love you guys, and I hope that that the sour taste of the Rate Bowl and then the Fernando's information doesn't kind of put a damper on what's been an awesome football season.
Well said from legendary, one of the best running backs we've ever had here, and an even better person. Can't thank you enough for coming on, Dontrell. Greg, got anything?
Just to piggyback on what Dontrell said, I know a lot of people made the tie-in with Coach Eck and Fernando Lovo with that addition of the contract, which the reason why it wasn't in Coach Olin's contract, because they just drew up a new contract for Coach Eck, so that's why that was put in now. But to Dontrell's point, if Coach Eck wanted to leave or a bigger school wanted Coach Eck, the big buyout, the $4 million buyout, they would write that too. So it doesn't matter that there's that stipulation, in my point of view, that ties Lovo to Eck. Any big school wants Eck, they'll write the check too. So to me, that's not a big fact. That's not a big clause that anybody should read into. But just to piggyback on Dontrell, thank you so much, Dontrell, for your expertise. We love having you, and everyone just for listening, and Lobo Nation again. Great season, and yeah, there's a momentary pause, but we got basketball season coming up. Lobo's at Boise State and basketball. Let's go, Coach Olin. Let's start revving up for basketball now, and so let's keep riding that momentum and see the basketball team now through the Mountain West and NCAA tournaments. And so just to everybody in this panel and everybody listening, happy holidays, and let's keep this thing going.
Greg, well said. Again, thanks. You know what? We mentioned that adding you and Mark Smith It's going to help the Pit Press. Having a guest like Dontrell increases, helps us. Dontrell is well thought of and one of the greats that we've ever had here. So we definitely love having him on every time, and you as well. Son, any last thoughts?
No, I'll just be brief. Really appreciate Dontrell for joining us. Dontrell, man, I was one of those little kids at University Stadium back in the early 2000s watching you and Hank Basket and all those guys kill it, man. So it's really cool to see you around UNM Athletics. Really, really appreciate all that you do. And yeah, I just echo what Greg said. There's one more chance for UNM Athletics to close 2025 with a win. That's tomorrow, Boise State on the road, 9 p.m. tip-off. I believe it's on FS1. We won't do a preview show for Boise State, but we'll have a written article out tomorrow evening. Be on the lookout for that, and go Lobos.
Thank you again. I think well said, Greg. Thank you to all our listeners and viewers and all the comments. Our show is made possible by your support. We really appreciate that. Our show has grown. We anticipated getting even bigger, and that's all due to you. And as Greg said, happy holidays for Dontrell Moore, Greg Archuleta, Nick Nunez. I'm Ed Nunez. We'll see you next time on the Pit Press Live.